Good afternoon. एक तो I would like to continue from where General Hasnain left off, and that is he talked about us not having a strategy. Well, he and I have worked together very closely in Kashmir for a long time, and during a very difficult period. And I think everything that he talked about subsequently was the strategy. So I think it's an evolving process, and we do strategize from day to day to understand what is happening on ground and to evolve with the situation. So, sir, I think you did a wonderful job there, and you should not deny that. Anyway, coming down to the issue of understanding Sufism to influence extremism in Kashmir, this debate, I think what Kalb Sadiq Sahab brought out, and I think was also brought out by Dr. Rashid, is that we should not pit Sufism against other forms of Islam, and Sufism is not another form of Islam. It's very much part of the religion. Now, the thing is that, of course, if you get into the debate about Sufism or Tasawwuf, whatever, you will not find its legitimacy in the Quran. That is true, but it is an evolutionary process which we would hopefully discuss. But before I start that, I would like you to understand what is actually happening to the youth in Kashmir. इसको आगे कैसे ले जाएं? नीचे. This is the famous Burhan Wani, and this is a video of his first message that he put out on YouTube. इसका वीडियो चला दीजिए ज़रा प्लीज़. आपका कुछ सिस्टम मेरे समझ से बाहर है. इसकी आवाज़ है कि नहीं?
आपके साथ से और आपकी दुआओं से हमेशा उनको सहोना पड़ा और उनको मुँह भी खाने पड़ी है. हमें आइंदा भी आपके सपोर्ट की ज़रूरत है, और हम पूरी वादी कश्मीर को ये पैगाम देना चाहते हैं, खासकर नौजवानों को हमें पैगाम देना चाहते हैं कि वो हमारे साथ आकर ज्वाइन करें.
चलने दीजिए.
मैदानी अमल में इसलिए हैं ताकि हमारे कौम की माओ बहनों की इज़्ज़त आबिर और सलामत रहे, ताकि इस कश्मीर में खिलाफत का निज़ाम कायम हो, और हम कश्मीर में तो क्या पूरी दुनिया में इंशाअल्लाह ताला खिलाफत का निज़ाम कायम करके इंशाअल्लाह दम लेंगे.
Well, it's a very long video, but I would leave it at here, because if you look at it, where he starts off talking about the Kashmir cause, but ends up talking about Khilafat. Now, this is actually how the entire movement in Kashmir has changed from the Azadi movement, and it's become a narrative about establishment of the Khilafat. And this is the radicalization of the Azadi movement as we see it there, which is now becoming a fairly dangerous thing. And there is where I would agree with General Hasnain that we need to understand that. We have to have a clarity about what we are actually facing. Because the confusion between the political movement and what is the religious undertones, that has to be understood very clearly. So I would say that you might like to look at what his successor, what he is like. This was Burhan Wani, who is dead, and this is इसका भी चला दे This is Zakir, who used to be studying engineering.
सुनूं मैं नाम तेरा धड़कनों में, या मजा आ जाए मौला दिल बदल दे, या रहूं बैठा मैं अपना सर झुका कर, या सुरूर ऐसा अता कर दिल बदल दे, या खुदाया फजल फरमा दिल बदल दे, या मौला मौला या तेरा हो जाऊं इतनी आरज़ू है, बस इतनी है तमन्ना दिल बदल दे, तेरा हो जाऊं इतनी आरज़ू है, बस इतनी है तमन्ना दिल बदल दे, पड़ा हूँ तेरे दर पर दिल शिकस्ता, रहूं क्यों दिल शिकस्ता दिल बदल दे, खुदाया फजल फरमा दिल बदल दे, या मौला मौला या मौला, करूं कुर्बान अपनी सारी खुशियाँ, तू अपना हम अता कर दिल बदल दे, बस एक फरियाद सुन ले मेरे।
So, sir, as you said, there are no role models. Unfortunately, he is the role model. Now, this was very, what should I say, very prominently. Well, this proliferated on the social media, on WhatsApp. This is circulated very widely amongst the Kashmiri youth, and this is unfortunately the kind of inspiration that the man on the street is getting. And if you now would understand why, when the question came up, is that why is a young boy today going out and is willing to get himself killed even when he knows there's an army operation going on and the bullets are going around? This is actually what is happening on ground. And is this the Kashmir question? That is something that we in that administration will have to look at very closely, because this is something that is it's very different. This entire narrative would actually have to go back a little point in history, and we have to see what was happening in 1979 globally. We found that the entire thing about the change of governments, the fall of the government, the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran, and the coming of the Islamic Republic by Ayatollah Khomeini. We had the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the madrasas of Pakistan were being used then to train and churn out mujahideen. And that is the time when actually jihad as a concept is being used as a political tool against the Russians. And at the same time, you have the hanging of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto by Ziaul Haq. And in Pakistan, Ziaul Haq's narrative changes from justice, from development, and he goes in for Islamization. Curiously, when Bhutto was hanged in Kashmir, there was a reaction against the Jamaat-e-Islami there. And they were singled out, their houses were burnt, their orchards were cut down, and there was mass rioting against the Jamaat-e-Islami. And it's in this background, actually, if you'll notice what happens subsequently, is that, and the siege of Makkah, of course, in 1979, where the entire West Asian narrative is shifting towards pan-Islamization and demanding the overthrow of what was at that time legitimate governments, or were they legitimate governments. So you see that then what happens is that the diversion of these terror outfits, which is in the form of the Harkatul Ansar, the Harkatul Mujahideen, the Jamaatul Mujahideen, and of course the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which was being set up in Afghanistan in 1990. They were introduced, very deliberately introduced in Kashmir to change the entire narrative of Kashmir from a political movement, and it was then that the orthodox Muslim groups, that is then that the Jamaat-e-Islami, that is then that other organizations raised their head, and it is based using these terror outfits. They started promoting the whole concept of radicalization, the holy war for sacred values, and that is when the Kashmir movement starts shifting from a political to becoming a quasi-religious movement. The disturbances, of course, created a kind of a vacuum. There was an administrative and political vacuum, and therefore it enhanced the sense of deprivation amongst the people. And we all understand that political and administrative deprivation does enhance radicalization. And therefore, the whole Kashmiri question got diluted. And Kashmiriyat itself came under a rather severe attack. So much so that in 2012, sorry, not 2012, 2011, the shrines in Kashmir were burnt down, including Dastagir Sahib. And this is part of a very deliberate plan by the Lashkar-e-Taiba. Those cases were investigated, and it was found out that they had got boys on passport to Pakistan, and their specific task was to attack these shrines, particularly if they were Shia shrines. So in Badgam, we had about 5 or 6 of them getting burnt. Fortunately, we got the group, so that issue got stalled there itself. Now, the question is that what is it that they do to encourage radicalism? And that is a very selective interpretation of the Quran, and I think those interpretations are there. And the first part is actually what they use. You can read it for yourself, but the thing is that 8.61 and 5.532, those are the other part of it, and the first part is actually in the context of war. So this is, it's actually just that first line that the first sentence that they use to basically justify the cause of jihad. And nobody talks about the great thing about that if anybody kills an innocent person, it would be as if he has killed the whole humanity, and if anyone saves a single life, it would be as if he has saved the whole humanity. And that is, I think, what Kalbe Sadiq Sahib was also trying to bring out, and that is the truth of Islam, but unfortunately it is the first sentence that is used, not the last one. Now, Sufism. Where does Sufism find its place in the religion? This is a big debate, but let me venture, because when we in JNK were trying to find the counter narrative in religion, we were advised by many of our friends in Kashmir that the actual lay in the Hadith of Jibreel. And the Hadith itself is there, you can read it, where the 3 concepts are talked about: Islam, Iman and Ihsan. Islam is actually the practice, the 5 things that you have to do that is brought out. It is namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, and which is the 5th one now. Then he asks the Prophet about Iman. And Iman is a belief in Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, that is the prophets that came, the one that it was talked about all the prophets who came, all the books that were written, and all His angels, as well as belief, the faith. Qadar, exactly, the Qadar. And then last of all, he comes to Ihsan. Now, this is the beauty of the religion of Islam, which very few people actually try to understand. And that is when he talks about what is Ihsan. And he says that is worship of Allah as if He was in front of you. Though you do not see Him, remember that He sees you. Now, most of us think of morality in the context of whether you can get caught or not. Whether as children your parents could catch you, whereas adults whether the law could catch you. So you would always try to do things so that you were not seen by the other person. But here it's a very beautiful concept that you would do everything good because you know that Allah is seeing you. If nobody else is seeing you, at least Allah is seeing you. And this is actually the beauty of the religion, the concept of Ihsan. The person who follows Ihsan is the Mohsin. It's something we all know about the Mu'min. Everybody talks about the Muslim, but very few people talk about the Mohsin. If you look at it, it's actually it's a stage of religion. And it is from Ihsan that the whole concept of Sufism actually comes out. That is the belief and the devotion to God as if He was there. Now, what actually happened with this was that after the Prophet had passed over, the proselytization of Islam took place through action. And it was basically you either accepted or you fought. And that was the action part of Islam. And this also got diluted about 400-500 years down the line, and the biggest proponent of that, who's also called Hujjat al-Islam, that is Imam Ghazali, and he's considered to be the biggest authority on the interpretation of Islam after the Prophet himself. And that he is the one who actually brings out the concept of devotion, and that is where the concept of Sufism starts, though the word itself doesn't exist in the Quran, and nor does Tasawwuf, but the fact is that this was the concept. And it's in keeping with that concept that actually the Sufi saints traveled far and wide. And in Kashmir's context, a lot of them came to Kashmir and they established seminaries to teach this philosophy. Now, that was basically about the message of love and assimilation. That is also what helped to convert a large part of the subcontinent to Islam. But gradually, over a period of time, the preacher died and the seminary actually became a tomb. So people who visited the tomb, and when it became a syncretic function, and a lot of the non-Muslims started reaching there, it became a slightly materialistic thing, and when people started asking for favors, and the tabis and the other such things started coming in. So the original purpose of it being a seminary for the propagation of the concept of ihsan got lost, and that is when the Muslim parent wanted to find a place to teach their children, and this they thought was un-Islamic, very rightly so. And then what happens is that the madrasas comes back. The madrasa, when it comes back, it goes back against this ethos, and it goes back to the concept of of action in Islam, and that is what you are seeing today. So I think basically, if you are able to get that seminary back in place, which teaches the concept of ihsan, then you can think in terms of promoting, quote unquote, what you call Sufism. So therefore, I think, but you cannot look at that subject in isolation. There is a political narrative around that, because radicalization and identity always comes around a political question, and therefore in the Kashmir context there has to be a political effort while you are trying to deal with the religious question as well. And therefore I feel that the mainstream political parties must include the youth as part of their agenda. There has to be a grassroots local self-government initiative. And what is tragically true, which is something that you must look at, the education performance of the government schools. There are 247 government schools in last year's examination which had a pass percentage of less than 40%. Some of them actually had 0%. And you'd be surprised where the largest number of them are. They're in Srinagar city. Downtown Srinagar had got, I think, 11 of the 16 schools which had got 0 pass percentage. So the children also must be occupied, and its occupation is to be other than sports. Because a Kashmiri youngster has got the same aspirations as a youngster anywhere else. He is also on the net. He is also seeing what is happening globally. He also knows what young people can do. He also understands fashion. In fact, one strange thing about Kashmiris is every young Kashmiri at the end of it thinks that he's some kind of a guy who should be on the big screen or the small screen. So heavily into advertising. And there have been great many success stories are there. So there's something which is true. But what is there, the problem, I mean, I think last point about social media, I think somebody might be like to talk about it also. That's something that happened with social media, I think, which most governments didn't understand or comprehend fully, was that everybody thought that social media would proliferate and it would diffuse identity. It happened to the contrary. It reinforces identity. And actually, when he compares, the young Kashmiri boy compares himself to people in the other parts of the country and the world, he thinks he's very deprived. Now, he doesn't know who to target his anger at. So, obviously, it will be against symbols of authority. So, I would reiterate the fact that we need to re-establish the seminary, because I'm sure most Kashmiri parents would like to take their children out of these madrasas and send them to places where this, the ihsan concept of the religion can be taught. Kashmir has got, I think, 2 or 3 Sufi shrines in every district. So it's not that there is any paucity of infrastructure there. There is, I think there is a need for having a chair in Kashmir University, for example. There is a chair for Islamic studies, but there's nothing about Sufism there. And the other thing that is most important, that the governments must basically have always shied away from this question. The relationship between culture and religion. We must realize that there is a very strong bonding about that. Sufism is also part of the in the Kashmiri culture. The way they look at religion in Kashmir. So it is not that they are diluting the religion. It's the way they look at it. And a culture, as we all understand, is basically an issue which is related to where you belong. So if we treat the revival of Sufism as cultural preservation and not shy away from this factor, not try to deny it and be apologetic about it, I'm sure it can very easily. But the question remains again, that we must not promote one against the other. The issue is that if they see the shrines as polytheism, there's no need to emphasize that. I think that's one of the traps that we all fall into. We all say that, they're such good people, they go to the shrine, and because it looks akin to what we do, so therefore it's a good practice. That's not what the debate we need to get into. We can go back to the highest form of faith in Islam, the concept of ihsan, and let's just try and promote that. I think that is where Sufism's origins lie, and that is where the answer lies in our perspective. And I think my views are shared by a lot of our colleagues in administration in Kashmir. And I will leave you with this thought as to what actually jihad is against, and this is quoting Imam Ghazali. Thank you very much.